was all things, and in the beginning there was light. Cycles of night, day, and a rhythm to the years, so built in, a rhythm to the brain. We have inherited a pattern from protoplasm to prototype. The human shape and human form is built with light in mind, to see, to survive, to evolve. We are animals. Light guides us through nature and defines the part we play in it. But from flat plains to tall towers, our way of life has changed. And alongside it, our tether to the natural world. So, what's happened? 3 billion years evolving in nature, hijacked by the habits of a post-industrial shift. We have turned inwards, flocked inside, fluorescent, electric filament spaces. Natural, these are not. Until now. At Phos, we're reconnecting, realigning with the natural world through neuroscientific research. Artificial luminaires made organic, the closest LED chip to natural light, finishes inherent in nature. A full biophilic structure. Designed, manufactured, and assembled in the UK for the past 138 years. Recyclable, responsible, reliable. Out of nothing, there was all things. And in the beginning, there was light. At Phos, we harness the power of light to bring the outside in, just as nature envisioned.
Right. So hopefully that got everyone sufficiently pumped up. So look, happy World Earth Day. It's a big day, especially, every year it seems to be more and more relevant. Today we're joined by an amazing panel with a really unique perspective. Each person has a really unique perspective. So just to sort of run you through what World Earth Day is as well, to contextualize it. So World Earth Day is an annual event on April 22nd to demonstrate support for environmental protection. We have a really unique perspective on biophilic design and sustainability from a scientific, lighting design and applied color psychology perspective. And thank you guys for joining us. The presentation will be about half an hour long, and then we have 15 minutes of Q&As at the end. So hopefully you guys who are watching can, get the creative juices flowing and hopefully have some good questions at the end. And I'm sure the panelists will be looking forward to answering them. So without further ado, to introduce our panel. So we have Marcus Steffan. So Marcus is a lighting designer, author, university lecturer, and champion of diversity in the workplace, and also a strong advocate for sustainability. We have Karen Haller, who is a leading international authority in the field of applied color design and color and design psychology on how color and design affects and influences behavior. And Dr. Shelley James, who is a consultant, speaker, curator, well-advisor, and lighting industry educator extraordinaire. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive straight in. So, if we're talking about biophilic design, it's a sort of bit of a hot topic. It's got more and more prominent as the years have gone by. But, to start this conversation, we should define it. So biophilic design is about combining nature, sustainability, and well-being interiors by bringing the outside world back into the built environment to create spaces that are better aligned with our evolutionary history. And it involves things like air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, community, and innovation and color. So there's a whole range of factors that help the human being, feel comfortable and healthy in the built environment. So, if we were to bring it back to World Earth Day, and particularly, I guess we'll ask the first question to Marcus. Why is local, sustainable, community-driven manufacturing such an important part of the biophilic design process?
I think the two parts, the biophilic design and sustainability, are actually two sides of the same coin. I mean, the whole point of biophilic design is getting back in touch with nature. We realize that it is actually really important for our health. It's good for society to have that connection, which you get when you use biophilic design, and it's really embracing that and going back to it. But without embracing sustainable principles, and part of that is looking at manufacturing, looking at sourcing, looking at how you bring everything together on it while looking after the earth, we're not going to have that nature in 50 years' time. We're not going to be able to do biophilic design in 50 years' time if we don't look after the earth now. And so we've really got to embrace both parts, because otherwise we're just going to do it for a couple of decades and then we're in real trouble.
No, I completely agree. It's interesting. I was actually in Spitalfields Market in London a little while ago, and I saw this amazing stall, and this person sort of told me his entire story. He did sort of hand care products and sort of lotions and potions and that kind of stuff. But his story and the connection to the product that he had and then he passed on to me was sort of a real reminder of the need to connect with things around us at a deeper level. And I ended up walking away a little bit lighter in the pocket. But it does, when I see that in my house, there is a real emotional connection to the story, to the sort of pedigree of these products that he's manufactured. And often in a world where things arrive in an Amazon flat packed box, and we never really understand the story behind the manufacturer, whether it's sustainable or anything like that, you can kind of lose a bit of a tribal connection that's sort of been ingrained with us through billions of years of being connected with one another and being connected with the materials that we use to create the products that go into our house. So yeah, there's an emotional sort of part to it, I guess.
There's definitely the emotional side, and having that, knowing that where you're buying it from has actually thought about how they're producing the materials and that it's local. There's also, which is what I find myself looking at a lot with my work now, is the impact that you have on the practical side of it. If you're going local, if you're getting it from someone who is local, you're reducing your carbon footprint on transport, which is one of the major factors and contributors to carbon dioxide in the environment. So you're reducing those journey times, but also when you're looking ahead to things like circular economy, reusing those fittings, if you're using local manufacturing, you're supporting local businesses there, you're bringing that into the community. And then when it comes to reusing, it's very easy. The people are right there. You're not sending things halfway around the world to be repaired and refurbished. It's there. It's ready to go, so that you build this almost a community around the buildings and the projects that you're creating, so that there's that entire support structure afterwards.
No, I completely agree. And sorry, Shelley, yeah.
I just wanted to add a point to that, if that's okay. I think one of the interesting things about local sourcing is the way that, if you think about the geography and the geology of the world and how different it is. I was born in Jamaica and I live in the north, and I know how different it feels in those different environments, and how we have a kind of history of what feels comfortable, whether it be food or clothes, and that relates to our kind of our rooted, what we grew up with in terms of the materials and colours and patterns and climate. And so I think there's something else about materials which came from your local geology, your local climate, which creates an environment which feels more natural. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of your processing power and your sense of ease and ability to recover from things. But I think that sense of being at home in your own environment is something that local sourcing can really offer.
Yeah, it creates the familiar, doesn't it? It's familiar to us. Yeah.
Well, it reinforces, I guess, that sense of place, doesn't it? You know, if you use the materials that are in keeping with the local environment and stuff like that, you're seeing that, and you feel naturally, you know, connected to that local region, which is cool. We've actually got a poll as well, so let me know. Hopefully this works. It's my first time trying a poll, so we'll give it a go. But we'll give it a go. Right, so hopefully you can all see that. Maybe someone might be able to let me know in the chat. Can you guys see that? You can see that? Great. So yeah, so what do we think? So how many people knew local sustainable manufacturing was part of biophilic design? So, you know, for me personally, when I was learning about it, it was a bit of a, I don't know, it's something I'd overlooked really. I didn't necessarily think of the local structure in the story. And I guess I feel more, you know, with the story I told you earlier about connecting with that person's products just through the story and the local region that he was making it. So, you know, the emotional connection, it's something I didn't really know. So yeah, 64% didn't know about this. A few of you did as well. Well played. But, you know, it's interesting. It's, you know, biophilic design, there is a bit of a thought behind it just being bringing trees in your bedroom or in your bathroom, but there's a lot more to it. And well, this is why we're doing the chat. Right. So go on to our next question. This one is for Karen. So what's our relationship with color in the natural world? How can we use this to improve the built environment? And there's a second part to it, which I think you'll probably roll your eyes at. Is it just the color green that is biophilic?
No, I just laugh instead. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if you've all seen this. I'm sure the listeners as well. Is that it seems to be that biophilic design, the shorthand has become green and plants. And if you put a green wall in, you know, painted wall green, and you put a few plants into your home, that's biophilic design. But I'm very much of the belief of why limit to green when we have all of nature's color palettes at our disposal. You know, every color appears in nature except brilliant white. That's a man-made color, and that was first developed in the 1940s. But every color can be found in nature. And the key really, and I think this is something that Shelley was just touched on before, is that there are colors and there are color palettes that we feel very familiar with, depending, you know, where we live, but also what resonates with our personality. And nature does this beautifully, not the way that we've I think we've messed up nature a lot, but nature as it was intended, as in its purest form, each season has its own color palettes. And those colors that are in that time of the year, so if you look at autumn, for instance, some of the colors are saffron yellow, sunshine yellow, olive green, rust red, you know, rust oranges. These all have a harmony and they all work together. And if you go and take colors from different times of the year or different seasons and put them with another season, that's when we find this discord, this dis-ease, when it's jarring. And we don't, and this dis-ease is in we feel ill at ease. We don't feel comfortable. So by using colors the way that nature does it and the way that nature intended, that suits our energies and for the spaces that we're creating, this is really how we can start to create places that are productive, where we feel safe, where we feel connected, and where we can really thrive. So I really believe when it comes to color and design, and you know this, Xander, you know, that this is what I talk about, is really nature and the shapes, textures, patterns, everything. When we do this in harmony with the way that nature does it, because it is our biggest teacher. You know, we should be looking to nature as our mentor, as our teacher, because it gives us all the answers we need, because we are nature. You know, we do come from nature, which is what your video was about. So that's very much, if we look at all of nature's colors and then work out what's the right palette to use to create the right impact, but influence positive behaviors, then we have this wonderful natural synergy and this symbiotic relationship with nature.
No, it's really well put. And I guess also it's talking about seasonal colors. And if you think about it, Winston Churchill said, we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. There's this idea that we put these buildings up, I guess, to try and connect with nature. You need to almost bring those seasonal changes and those colors inside, so you don't have that barrier between the outside and the in. You sort of you melt it down or you knock it down, so there's sort of a consistent fluidity between the artificial and the organic space.
So it's not like just going and building concrete buildings everywhere and then just putting plants all over it, because that's almost like a plaster solution. It's actually looking at what it is that helps us to thrive in our local environment, what is right for us, and creating that, because then that is where we connect back to the familiar, what then does feel very safe for us, what then feels comfortable for us, because we are familiar and used to it, not 20-story, 30-story concrete buildings, and then we just paint them in green, and that's supposed to be the answer. I don't believe that is.
Your comment on nature sort of showing us a lot of the way. I mean, at Phos, we use a lot of biomimicry, biomorphism. We look to nature to try and solve problems. So using mechanisms that are found in nature, billions of years of evolution, nature's already sorted out all these mechanisms. Exactly. And, you can see aeroplanes being based on stingrays and stuff like that. Nature is the biggest sort of it's perfected, over millions of years.
We should all go to the school of nature, shouldn't we?
Exactly. Yeah, Marcus. Yeah.
What I found really interesting about what you said there, Karen, is that using the seasons and the color palette, harmonizing it so you're not trying to mix that. When you're looking at community spaces, communal spaces, offices, and things like that, it's an excellent guideline to start from for that design, because if you're creating that harmonious environment, it's very likely to work for the majority of the people who are going to be inhabiting that space. And so you can use that almost as a starting point and guiding from there, and knowing that you are going to create that harmony and calmness within that environment.
Which also does show the deeply ingrained sort of relationship we have with that, right? And, talking about, say, 100 people in a space, the one aligning factor is that we can all relate to our local area and the seasonal changes within it, which is, I guess, a bit of an example of just how ingrained biophilic design really is within all of us without us necessarily knowing it.
It's not on trend and it's not fashionable, that's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Shelley, sorry, you can say something.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of things. One of them is that we only see color thanks to light. So I think there's an intimate link there. And what's been interesting is speaking to people like Dulux about colors which shift, their metameric colors, so the way that they behave in different lights. They actually created an IKEA grey, because when IKEA first brought out their LED lights, their blue LED lights, it was the first time you could actually get a grey which looked nice, because until then incandescent lights always made everything look a bit kind of greeny really in the evening. So I think that interplay of light and colour and the quality of colour, you can put two swatches up on the wall of the same colour on the tin, and actually as the day goes by, the way that shift is something really interesting. And so that's one point. The other point I'd like to make is simply, and you touched on it, is just how personal that is. And if you think about a forest or a space, there is a range of hues and densities. There's a particular, you can analyze that in terms of the densities and how that's making your brain fire, but also the balance of sort of soft colors and bright accents. And I think that's something else that we can learn from nature, is how to calibrate that palette between sort of the rice and spice equation from the rest and the stimulus, to create palettes which combine that and that offer people the balance that's working for them in the situation, what they're trying to achieve at that particular time.
Absolutely. It's from the soothing to the stimulating.
Well, I guess it brings us quite nicely onto the next question, which I'll launch with you now. So to the attendees, do you consciously build natural colours and textures into your home? If you're redesigning any part of your space, do you think about the materials the textures they'll be giving and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a big yes. It's a big yes. So whether that's conscious or unconscious, I guess maybe they might be able to let us know at the end with Q&As, or, might be able to tell us maybe in the chat whether or not it's consciously because they know it's good for us, or whether it's just a naturally, a natural thing that leads them to going. There's one person says no, you need to get your organic colors in, but it's good, whether or not it's something that people deliberately do through education, or whether it's something they do because they're naturally feeling like they want to be surrounded by nature and natural colors. And it's an interesting point. So Shelley, you are an advisor for Well, which is awesome. So what positive outcomes can sustainable biophilic design have for humans in the built environment? And can you give us some examples, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what's really interesting is how personal it is. I mean, there are some general rules, but then there are lots of things which are very specific. But in terms of the general rules, as you've pointed out before, there are some baselines about what the natural environment is like. And then there are ways in which we're each quite personal, whether it be your chronotype or the way you're built, the way your neurology is built. So we know that if you are in an environment which feels broadly stable and comfortable, the amount of processing power you need to commit to navigating through that is reduced. So we find in a gate lab, for example, in a lab I'm here in Bristol, where people you kind of have patterns around the wall, you can project it onto the floor. We see people are able to, and we ask them to kind of do something else, which, like counting backwards, which introduces a cognitive load, a sort of a thing that they need to do at the same time as walking. And it's really interesting to see how different kinds of patterns, particularly patterns which reflect the combination of the range of contrasts and the range of scales of pattern in the natural environment, even if they're not natural patterns, that the bandwidth used to process those to walk means that you can count, you can tap your head and rub your tummy more easily in environments which have some of those so-called natural qualities. So there are some basic principles, and including your circadian, sort of the diet of light and how much that matters, and things like access to daylight and the changing quality of light over the day. We know that if we offer people that basic routine framework, then their brains seem to, there's more room for other stuff, which, whether it be healing or concentrating or making friends or whatever it is. So there's that basic principle. But we also know that the environment, we respond very different people are very different. So there's something called prospect and refuge, which is a principle where some people are much more want to be able to be out there, and other people want to be in refuge and looking out. And so to kind of assume that everybody wants to be out in the savannah and that everybody wants to be out in the wild is actually not quite right. I think lots of people are very frightened of nature. They're frightened of how small it makes them feel. They're frightened of, not everybody likes camping, and not everybody likes that. So I think that's something else to consider. And one of the ways that certainly the best biophilic design, if anybody loves gardening, you will know that plants broadly need light, they broadly need water, but some of them want to be out there and some of them want to be tucked away in shade, and we are just as similar. And the best biophilic design invites people to create environments which respond to their needs, both in terms of their sort of basic biology and chronotype, but also in terms of the activity they happen to be undertaking. So whether you want to be in collaborative mode, we know that we can resolve conflicts more easily with certain kinds of light and certain kinds of patterns. But we also find that people are more, their reading speed goes up, accuracy, all kinds of other things go up when you're in an environment which is more stimulating. So, and if you look at sort of grand designs, you find people creating sort of accent feature walls, and you think, I couldn't live with that. Well, some people could. So there's a way in which the best biophilic design is like your favorite shoes. You try them on, the shoes that you want won't be the same ones for me, and I won't want the same ones for going dancing as I will for chilling out. So I think it's the best biophilic design gives people what they need. And what's really interesting is when you give people what they need, they don't tend to waste as much. They don't use and waste. So everything gets a lot sort of lighter and tighter and more sustainable and more sort of better matched to what we need. So I guess that's there is basic science which shows that design which reflects the patterns and colours and textures and time cues in nature helps us to relax and then do the other things our bodies need to do, but also just how incredibly different our sensitivities are depending on our biology, but also on what we're up to. So that's
I mean, it's really, really interesting stuff. I guess from a psychology perspective, what would be, essentially if you're getting rid of products less frequently because they align better with what makes you comfortable, if they're more personalized to you, does that, you may or may not know the answer to this, so sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but in terms of, the emotional connection that people then have to a product, if you're able to hear the story behind a product compared to just getting it shipped in from Amazon, does that then make you feel more personally aligned with it? Is there anything, is that similar to, is it the same kind of thing?
Yes, I mean, in a way, you could say, because I'm also a glass artist, and what I know is that when people essentially remake, if you tell somebody a story, they're remaking it in their mind. And there's a way in which that provenance becomes part of your own story. It's as though you'd made it yourself. And so anything that you invest craftsmanship in, and it's also a kind of a signal of who you are. So yes, there is definitely a way in which a more active choice about something, which comes from somebody that you have made eye contact with, whether it be yourself or somebody that you've met, makes a massive difference. And that's why so many brands have kind of the face of the brand, or because that is, you need to feel as though somebody cares and somebody was committed to creating something which worked for you. So I mean, the buy once, buy well is fantastic if you can afford it. And as we get older, we buy fewer things and tend to cherish them more. And that's part of a broader sort of risk-taking attitude to our world. But yes, I mean, I think encouraging people to, as we're doing in the lighting sector, there's been some beautiful work. I think Marcus shared a paper this week about a company which is giving money back for bringing their products back. And so I think there's a way in which particularly the lighting sector and the clothing sector are leading the way on creating relationships which are circular and more sustainable. So yes, there is a way in which,
I guess also it's slightly right, for example, for Karen and for Marcus, if lighting designers are such key parts to any architectural design, and harmonizing color is such a vital part to make sure people feel comfortable within it. I guess using lighting designers and color psychologists and stuff, when you're walking into a space that doesn't just have a run of a runway of downlights that illuminate the best floor in the space, when you have someone like Marcus coming in and really making those nuanced dynamite decisions to angle lights in the right place and all that kind of stuff, and you've got Karen harmonizing the whole thing. And I guess that does, when you walk into a space, make you feel like someone cares, like there is a story being told through light and color. And obviously there's a huge mutual response between both of them. Light affects color and all of that, which is obviously, again, not to talk too much about Phos, but we try high quality like CRI and TM30 values. There is a huge interplay between the connection you have with a space when you feel it's been designed properly and one that's just slap bang high rise developments. So yeah,
it's very true. I mean, that's good design. And I do think good design can be transformational to the way we live our lives. We've seen it in the past, and you can see it. If somewhere is designed well, people appreciate it, they understand it, and they use it more. There's great examples where you look at communities where redevelopment of community spaces have brought what were people quite closed off, whether it's on housing estates and things like that. They've redeveloped the area around it, brought people together there, and you created a community by designing a space well so that people want to inhabit it.
100%.
Just to add one other thing to that is that sense of a space that you can inhabit in your own way is something that there's a brilliant educational charity in the north called the Caldwell Trust, who are creating rooms for children with special needs, special educational needs, and allowing them to change how bright the lights are, how the colour of the light actually can have an amazing calming effect. So spaces which are, human-centred has become such a kind of a silly kind of whitewashy
Trigger
word,
word,
greenwashy
yeah.
word, but human-centered design, and in Florence's words, Florence Lamb's words, humanity-centered design extends beyond a kind of disposal, short-term environmental kind of equation to something which is much more holistic, and that's always going to be a virtuous circle.
Well put. Well, it brings it on to our third poll. Time for the team out there to give their shot at it. So is biophilic design this year's trend, or is it here to stay? This is also where I guess we see whether we've done our webinar all right. People say no, it's not. And we got one person it's this year's trend. It's interesting. I mean, I think with COP26, with the environmental crisis that's going on, I think also COVID has made a lot of people take stock about the disconnection. We were forced to disconnect from our friends, our family, the world around us, community spaces. And I think people found through reflection an appreciation of connecting deeper with things. And whether that's, a local community driven structure to create products and design spaces, or whether it's, bringing nature seasonally into the environment through interesting color schemes and things like that. It's I think it has made us take a bit of stock. So yeah, most of you saying it's here to stay, which is awesome news. And so look, I mean, we get on to the questions from the audience. So we've got about 15 minutes. I don't know if anyone has any questions for the panelists, but yeah, if you'd like to just type on the chat, then we'd be happy to answer. Tell you what, I have got one extra one just to sort of just to keep it going. So what role does artificial lighting play in biophilic design, and how might you apply it? I guess it's sort of a bit of a broad question. We might just start with Marcus, because as a lighting designer, it's a good place to start. And I know Shelley and Karen, with color being so closely associated, it's obviously very specific to yourself as well, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, it's integral. We've always wanted artificial light as humans, so that we can sort of extend our day and use it, starting out with fire and using that, which gave us extra light after it was dark, as well as giving warmth. And it's part of our existence. I think the key for artificial light is looking at the quality of light that you have. And so there's both quantity, and a lot of people get caught up on I won't say a lot of people, but a lot of people who are looking to tick boxes on developments and things like that. It's about the amount of light, but actually the quality of light is probably more critical. If you've got the right type of light in there, having something which is high CRI, low flicker, the right color temperature, hopefully adjustable and tailored to the space and the colors within the space, then you can really create an environment that people want to inhabit. And it's like, how often have people walked into a restaurant or a shop which has got horrible lighting, and it puts you right off. You don't even want to be there. You want to be out of that space as soon as possible, because it's putting you off being in that space. It's making you uncomfortable.
I guess the rendering side as well, Karen, how important is the interplay between artificial light and your field, applied color psychology? The power of color is huge, but how reliant is color on the artificial light source itself?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what Shelley was saying before, color is light, and there is always a debate between color people and light people of what's more important, color or light. And I always say that light is the most important thing to begin with, because without light, there is no color. I mean, before there was light, the animals, the organisms didn't need eyes. It was when light came that all of a sudden they needed eyes to be able to see, and then they started developing color, and color became a signaling language. So that's very much how color sort of started evolving, whether it was for camouflage, for a warning sign, or whether it was for attracting a mate. So very much the Darwin theory. But just what Marcus was saying, that, who of us hasn't gone into a clothing store or into a store, looked at the fabric and not been able to really work out what the color is, and had to take it to the window and try and work out what it is. And I've walked out of many stores because I can't, sometimes, and I don't know that if this is might have been the quality of the light at the time, and I'm sure it's now greatly improved, but sometimes with a light with a blue bias, it completely flattens all the colors, and you can't even see really shadows. You can't, it doesn't give that, you've lost all of that definition. But just to say, there is nothing that can really replace natural light, you know, as much natural light as possible. That's why a lot of buildings now are building in more skylights and trying to bring in a lot more natural light, because that is really the healing light. Artificial light can only go so far. It mimics, but it can't, I don't believe, I mean, I don't know, I can't cite any studies, but that it gives the same healing properties that natural sunlight can give. So, and the other thing, just to say to the designers on the call, I'm sure they've all come across this before, but be really aware of whether the light that you're putting in has a blue bias or a yellow bias, because it completely change the beautiful color scheme that you put together. And all of a sudden, if you've got a beautiful warm, like an autumnal color scheme, you put blue artificial lights in, it completely flattens the whole scheme, and the color, you've virtually lost the color. So just to be really really aware of that. But yeah, natural light as much as possible.
Yeah, well, there's quite well transported into a question from Hannah Wardle, who says, you know, what light spectrum is best for human well-being? Obviously, full spectrum natural light, as you said, Karen, the sunlight, but is it a continuous or an RGB mix? It might be a question more for yourself, Marcus.
Well, I would say, I mean, it's interesting because we've been through this whole sort of cycle where color change lighting has become possible or easily accessible with LEDs. By using RGB chips, and then understanding that actually having those spikes, those peaks in your spectrum in the RGB areas, which then try to blend and balance out, doesn't really work. And now you come full circle and you're going back to trying to create a broader, more even spread across the light spectrum, balanced more towards what you have from daylight, and copying that sort of structure of how the wavelength from daylight comes in. I mean, Shelley, you must have more to add on this.
A couple of points. I think one of them is to Karen's point about what light is healing or natural. Essentially, artificial lights have traditionally been designed for the visual system, not the non-visual system. So let's just kind of be clear about what the light's for. The daylight has some bit, obviously it's got the full electromagnetic spectrum, including things that we need for metabolizing vitamin D. So we're seeing some new light sources able to deliver an extended spectrum, which has the potential to do some of those other sort of marginal functions of the visual spectrum. So I think I mean, you can get into a lot of arguments about the chips and stuff, but to your point, Marcus, and I guess I feel not really qualified to answer that, because my sense is that it's like sort of arguing over whether we have, you know, what kind of eggs we're using to make this pudding. You know, it's what the pudding's like in the end that matters, and it's, you know, and how you're serving it and who's enjoying it that's the point. So I wish I could answer properly to whether it's the RGB or continuous spectrum that matters. What I do know is that for the non-visual system, actually, although there's been a lot of sort of anxiety about blue enhanced or blue enriched light sources, the non-visual system peak sensitivity is in that 480 nanometer range. It overlaps massively with the others, and so actually it's the brightness that counts first, and it's only when you're at a very, very low mesopic sort of twilight level that the range of lights, the components in that spectrum, start to make the biggest difference. But so if you're looking at the non-visual system, you could say that blue light is the caffeine of the brain, and you have to just kind of work out when you want that and allow that to wear off. And seeing the eye and brain as a kind of chemistry set, I think has some dangers because of what we're talking about, which is actually to respond to or get as close to the natural environment as we possibly can, and particularly the natural environment of after dark and darkness, which also, if we handle that well, not only allows us to switch off and remember up to 40% more if we get a good night's sleep, but also allows the plants and animals around us to take a break. 40% of light is wasted in lighting up the night sky. So we can talk a lot about the kind of the fine-tune the wavelengths, and I think very often people get upsold lighting products, which ends up throwing away stuff which was actually perfectly good. So I guess I'm making an argument for keeping it simple and thinking about what the light's for before we worry too much about what's behind that. I hope that answers the question.
So yeah, no, it's an interesting topic area, and I think James Paul's kind of added quite an interesting additional point. Brought in quite well the fact, a lot of people think biophilic design is bringing trees inside. But when you then look at those trees, how do you then sustain them? Is it about thinking about light sources that, as you say, extend beyond the electromagnetic wavelength or electromagnetic spectrum to allow you to make vitamin D and stuff like that? In terms of plants, how do you then sustain them? Which parts of the spectrum sustain plants, and how can we think about artificial lights in terms of supporting wider ecosystems in the built environment?
What's interesting is that people like Seoul Semicon, they actually sell semiconductor with their full spectrum suit. They actually begun in the horticulture area, and we tend to historically we spent more money on lighting cash crops like plants than we do schools, like tomatoes, than schools, because we see the payback so much more quickly. And we know that for plants, the UV tends to make them grow up, and red tends to make them go sideways. It's kind of ripen. So, but what we've also found, people like Seoul Semicon and others have found, is that offering them full spectrum means that they grow more slowly, but actually they tend to taste better and be more disease resistant. So there are ways of, I guess that's what I was saying, seeing our bodies and brains as a chemistry set is problematic, because we get these sort of unexpected consequences of, like putting caffeine in, extra caffeine in something, or monosodium glutamate or saccharin. There are ways that you can boost or pump the calorific value of a light source, but we're messing with an extraordinary ecology that we don't really understand.
Well, there's another interesting point as well. It's how do we measure the quality of artificial light? We can sort of say 98 CRI and stuff like that. Quite an interesting new approach by I think it's Bridgelux that do it. They say average spectral difference. So it's using TM30 values every wavelength to see how close it can meet exactly what natural light is. So, say if you've got 98 CRI, you could have 110% blue and then 80% orange, and that averages out as, which isn't necessarily a good explanation as to how consistent the fitting is with natural light. So the fitting, we say we have industry leading light quality because we have the closest LED chip to natural light on the market. It is 8% off full spectrum natural light in terms of TM30 values hitting that 100%, perfect in line with outdoor stuff. But it's potentially an interesting thing in the industry is the measurement of artificial light and reframing the way we think about matching natural sunlight.
Yes, and I mean that is fiddling at the margins in a way, simply because if you get outside for an hour in the morning, all sorts of other stuff is taken care of. So it's you're fine-tuning your multivitamins when actually, if you just had a square meal from time to time, all kinds of other things would be resolved. So I guess I'm just making an argument for Karen's point about the power of the natural world.
Completely.
So I get it, and I'm obviously beautiful light is an amazing thing, and obviously we're spending money on and everything. But we can sort of, at this point, most people in schools, hospitals, old people's homes are living with the equivalent of turkey Twizzlers, kind of hamburgers diet, and just giving them the occasional salad would be a great start. So I guess I'm making a point for kind of looking at where the improvements are, and obviously amazing the way that you guys have broken new ground on what's possible in lighting. But there's a huge world of really desperately bad lighting out there that could do with a bit of attention too. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
No, it's fascinating. Look, I think, I'm a little bit aware of time. I know, Marcus, you have to shoot off as well. So I think we said we do sort of 15 minutes of questions. I know it's a huge topic, and we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. If we choose one final one, just with a bit of a quick answer, and we'll do a wrap up, and that'll be it. But I think an interesting one from Zeynep Kavan is, which steps do you take to bring biophilic design to lighting design projects? We've got a lot of lighting designers here. How can we introduce biophilic design to lighting design schemes and into projects as a whole? We might start with you, Marcus, if that sounds okay.
Yeah, sure. I think what Shelley said, people are living on turkey twizzlers at the moment. Basically bringing in a modicum of reasonable lighting is probably going to make a huge difference just in itself. It probably makes my job a little bit easier for the next 10 years because I don't have to push it that far just to make a huge difference as it is. But I think it's just considering that space. It's just a more considered design. And I think just naturally producing a good lighting design for a space, considering how it's going to feel within that, how people are going to inhabit it, how are they going to use it, going through the normal lighting design process that we've been doing for many years is probably going to integrate very well with biophilic design. I think what you're going to see with lighting design is that actually people are realizing there is more demand, there's more requirement for having a lighting design done rather than putting in a grid of lights and satisfying a minimum lux level. And that's what we're talking about. We already do this as lighting designers. We already look for good quality lights, looking for high CRI, low flicker, things with the right color temperature. We're considering the environment which we're illuminating and how the light is required. Just producing good lighting design is going to harmonize very well with biophilic design. And then I think the other thing for lighting designers, if I quickly add this, is daylight. Just consider daylight more. I mean, when the Well Standard was published a few years ago, that was the big takeaway. Just try and get more daylight and use that as best you can. And that's what we can do as lighting designers.
Awesome. I think also, Karen, we might, I think it'd be quite a nice way to wrap up as to maybe, so Marcus, you've said your closing statement, I guess, on biophilic design for lighting designers. Karen, how would you advise the viewers on the next steps and the best steps to take to incorporate biophilic design in their design process?
What, through in regards to color?
Yeah, with regards to color, any kind. I guess what would your closing statement be about how we can adopt a biophilic practice?
Yeah, I mean, I always say this statement, people laugh, but it's, with Fight Club, the first thing you do is you don't talk about Fight Club. I always say that about color. If you start talking about color straight away to your clients and talk about it in a scheme, you will go down an emotional rabbit warren, and all this emotional connection and what I like and what I don't like all comes up. I always start my conversation about color, about behaviors. So how do you want people to positively behave in that space? Because by understanding behaviors, then you're able to understand what the psychological primaries of the colors that will help elicit those positive behaviors. And that's almost like then you're working backwards, and then you're able to know which the color scheme. And then when it comes to putting the scheme together is by using colors that then come within one season, one time of the year. And I don't mean you in all autumn, you put autumn colors in, and then in winter, you put winter colors in. It will stay the same all year round because that is what is right for the majority of people. But it's always looking, first of all, is what are the behaviors that you want in the space, not the mood, not the feeling, but because you know that you've got your scheme right, and you by the people who are using the space, by the behaviors that they're actually displaying. And that's how you know whether the colors, whether the design style, which is all biophilic, is then the right one for those people who are using that space.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really, really interesting. And I guess, Shelley, if you have a sort of two minute final nugget of wisdom for the viewers on biophilic design and how we can consider it more.
Well,
for 2 minutes. It's a tough question.
No, it'll be less. I think the main thing is to simply pause for a moment and think about what makes you what you need. I think we all are actually experts in what we need if we take a moment to reflect, and instead of following a trend or following what somebody else thinks we should have or what somebody else thinks we deserve. I think we all know what works for us, and I think respecting that and being ambitious about that and being ambitious about the spaces that we create for others, I think has got, and actually there's a great point in the chat, and actually how that's going to impact the environment around us. So sometimes our light after dark affect somebody else's ability to sleep. So I think that sort of respectful awareness of your own needs and those of the planet around you is always going to be the right place to start. It's going to be the most sustainable, the most healthy, the most joyful, and ultimately offer the best value actually for everybody. So that's my it's like be the expert in your own biophilic design, and you're not going to go too far wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I tell you what, I thought it might be interesting actually just to read the factors involved in it, just one last time, and then we'll play the video just one last time for anyone who wants to hang around who didn't see it at the beginning. And panelists, thank you so much, Shelley, Karen, and Marcus. You've been just some awesome insight into each of your unique sectors, and thank you for the time and your wisdom and everything. So just want to say, I think probably on behalf of everyone that's attended, a massive thank you to you three. So yeah, I'll run through this list. We'll play the video. Please feel free to leave the chat if you have other stuff to go on to. But thank you for joining and presenting. And so here is the list. So factors of biophilic design include air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, community, sustainability, innovation, and color. So it's quite an interesting sort of, hopefully we can connect to that a little bit. So guys, thank you so much.
Welcome. Pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. Well, look, we'll leave you with the video one last time, and happy Friday. Enjoy your weekends. And yeah, thank you very much to everyone for joining.
Out of nothing, there was all things, and in the beginning, there was light. Cycles of night, day, and a rhythm to the years, so built in, a rhythm to the brain. We have inherited a pattern, from protoplasm to prototype. The human shape and human form is built with light in mind, to see, to survive, to evolve. We are animals. Light guides us through nature and defines the part we play in it. But from flat plains to tall towers, our way of life has changed. And alongside it, our tether to the natural world. So, what's happened? 3 billion years evolving in nature, hijacked by the habits of a post-industrial shift. We have turned inwards, flocked inside, fluorescent, electric filament spaces. Natural, these are not. Until now. At Phos, we're reconnecting, realigning with the natural world through neuroscientific research. Artificial luminaires made organic, the closest LED chip to natural light, finishes inherent in nature. A full biophilic structure. Designed, manufactured, and assembled in the UK for the past 138 years. recyclable, responsible, reliable. Out of nothing, there was all things. And in the beginning, there was light. At Phos, we harness the power of light to bring the outside in, just as nature envisioned.